First at 9 this Wednesday, the 23rd of April 2025. Risky outlook. Downside risks for Sri Lanka remain exceptionally high despite the recent growth, says the World Bank. Calls for further efforts to reduce poverty and support growth. Balancing the books. 60 billion rupee annual revenue loss predicted due to revisions to the income tax threshold. However, Inland Revenue Department confident of achieving 3 trillion rupee revenue target by broadening the tax net. Export revenue. Sri Lanka's total exports for March 2025 grew 11.76% month on month, bringing in $1.5 billion. On the hunt. 3 individuals apprehended in connection with the murder of political activist Dan Priyasad.
Chino Dairy, Sri Lankawama Kiren Perata. ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
කට්ට පරිස්සම් කරගත්තොත් අපි පරිස්සම්.
This is Derana First at 9, live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9, brought to you by Sri Lanka's most trusted news source, Derana. I'm Tharindu Mahendra, joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. In your top story this evening, the World Bank says that despite recent economic growth and development in the country, downside risks for Sri Lanka remain exceptionally high. These risks are primarily driven by moderating global growth, elevated global interest rates and unprecedented trade policies that are likely to constrain capital inflows into the nation. In its economic development update for Sri Lanka in 2025, the World Bank also noted that although Sri Lanka's economic growth has outpaced projections last year, further efforts are needed to reduce poverty and support medium-term growth. The World Bank says that Sri Lanka's economy has made a remarkable recovery in 2024, surpassing growth expectations by recording 5% growth compared to the projected 4.4%, mainly driven by strong performances in construction and tourism-related services. In 2025, growth is expected to moderate to 3.5%, reflecting scarring effects of the crisis and structural impediments to growth amid global headwinds and unprecedented trade policy uncertainty. The World Bank also predicts the island nation's current account to be in deficit in 2025 due to reduced exports impacted by trade-related uncertainties, which outweigh the impact on imports. Inflation is expected to turn positive by mid-2025, but remain below the central bank's medium-term target. The global lender, reflecting the continued impact of the economic crisis, says that over a third of the population is expected to be in or at risk of falling into poverty in 2025. Highlighting the external effects on economic growth, it states that high global interest rates and unprecedented trade policy uncertainty are likely to constrain capital inflows, deter investment and weaken export demand, resulting in potential trade-related job losses. It also warns that further regressive indirect taxes could worsen the poverty outlook. The World Bank, highlighting child health issues, states that it raises concern about long-term human capital development and intergenerational poverty transmission. In order to mitigate the situation, the global lender urges maintaining policy consistency and pursuing structural reform to support macro-fiscal financial stability, enhance competitiveness and attract fresh non-debt creating capital inflows. It added that strengthening the social protection system will safeguard the most vulnerable and ensure the recovery's benefits are inclusive and broad-based. Now, the Inland Revenue Department says 60 billion rupees in tax revenue will be lost this year due to the income tax threshold being increased from 1.2 to 1.8 million rupees in annual income. However, during a government media conference today, Inland Revenue officials claimed that despite this lost revenue, the department plans to achieve this year's nearly 3 trillion rupee revenue target by broadening Sri Lanka's tax net. Meanwhile, the department also clarified that the self-declarations for exemption from withholding tax can be submitted without obtaining a taxpayer identification number.
යම් පුද්ගලයෙකුගේ වාර්ෂික 탁සේරුවන ආදායම
If a person's income from interest on deposits within a year of assessment does not exceed 1.8 million rupees, they can submit a self-declaration to the bank or other financial institution that holds their deposit. The relevant form is available on the Inland Revenue Department's website and at banks. A taxpayer identification number is required to submit this declaration. Therefore, a significant number of people came to the Inland Revenue Department's head office and regional offices to obtain their TIN. We informed banks to accept these declarations without the TIN for now. The department will receive details of individuals who submitted declarations without TINs by early next month. Subsequently, the department will issue taxpayer identification numbers to them. This declaration is only valid for the current year of assessment. A separate declaration is required for next year as we do not know how the exemption threshold will fluctuate by then.
ආයි එකක් දෙන්න ඕනේ මොකද ඒකේ වැඩි වෙයිද අඩු වෙයිද කියන එක දන්නෙත් නෑනේ
2019 20 වර්ෂවල withholding tax එක කපාගත්ත අයගේ රිෆයින්ඩ් එක තාම දීලා නැහැ 19 20 රිෆයින්ඩ් එක තාම දෙන්න පුළුවන් කාලය කොච්චරද 19 20
Refunds for 2019 and 2020 were delayed due to the COVID pandemic. However, people can contact the Commissioner of the Regional Branch of the Inland Revenue Department where they have their tax files about the reason for that refund being delayed. If there are no exceptional issues, these funds can be issued by now.
රිලීස් කරන්න පුළුවන්
25 ආදායම් බදු වර්ෂයේ ඔබතුමාලගේ ඉලක්කගත ආදායම කොච්චරද? බදු සීමාවර රුපියල් ලක්ෂ 12 ඉඳන් ලක්ෂ 18ට වැඩි කරපු හින්දා ඒකෙන් අහිමි වෙන බදු ආදායම කොපමණද?
මේ අවුරුද්දට බිලියන 2195
The target for 2025 alone is 2.195 trillion rupees. A loss of 60 billion rupees in revenue is expected due to this concession. However, we are focusing on broadening the tax net to properly bring individuals who should be paying tax but aren't and individuals paying less tax than is mandated for their actual income level into the fold. By doing that, other similar concessions can be granted.
ඔය විදිහට තවත් සහන දෙන්න පුළුවන් අවස්ථාව
පිරිපුන් ජීවිතයකට ඔබ සමගින් පෙරට Union Assurance. චන්දුරුසුමේ කාගෙන් මන අපේ සිග TV සඳහා සුපිරි ඩීල්.
Now, the remains of the late Pope Francis, laid out in an open coffin, were placed at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome today, allowing the public to mourn and pay their final respects ahead of his funeral this Saturday. Meanwhile, Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit, departed Sri Lanka this morning to attend the Pope's funeral. Pope Francis's coffin was taken to St. Peter's Basilica in Rome today, where it will remain for 3 days, allowing the faithful to pay their respects. Inside the basilica, Pope Francis's casket was not put on an elevated bier, as was the case with past popes, but was placed on the main altar of the basilica, simply facing the pews. The funeral at 1:30 p.m. Sri Lankan time on Saturday, the 26th of April at St. Peter's Square will be attended by numerous world leaders, including US President Donald Trump, French President Emmanuel Macron, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Prince William of Great Britain. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin will be a notable absentee. Following the funeral ceremony, the Pope's remains will be taken to the Basilica of St. Mary Major in Rome and laid to rest. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka's Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit, departed the country this morning to attend the Pope's funeral. In the meantime, several Sri Lankan politicians and ambassadors to Sri Lanka arrived at the Apostolic Nunciature to Sri Lanka today to share messages of condolence for the passing of the Pope. President Anura Dissanayake says discussions between Sri Lanka and the United States on revising US reciprocal tariffs on Sri Lankan exports have been successful. Addressing an NPP public rally in Ratnapura today, the President went on to say that Sri Lanka and the US are scheduled to issue a joint statement on the matter in the coming days. Another NPP public rally themed Outcome is Clear, Victory is Ours in view of the impending local government elections was held in Ratnapura today under the patronage of President Anura Dissanayake.
Sri Lanka is expected to see its highest number of tourist arrivals in 2025. However, despite this promising growth in tourism, our country still offers a limited number of attractions for visitors. Therefore, it is essential to develop new tourist destinations such as Yapahua, Anuradhapura, Jaffna and Trincomalee. We must also focus on increasing our export income. However, recent developments in the United States have raised concerns, especially regarding their potential impact on our textile and and apparel sectors. In response, we are actively working to address the situation. Yesterday, the Deputy Minister of Finance, along with a delegation from Sri Lanka, held discussions in the US. They reported that the talks were highly productive and a joint statement will be issued soon, reflecting the mutual agreement of both parties. There have been criticisms about political leaders misusing public funds. The people gave us their vote to change that reality, and we have begun to doing so. Some ask, even if you are not stealing now, what will happen to those who did? Today I had a meeting with the Attorney General to understand what support they need and what challenges they are facing. They informed us that they are in the final stages of preparing to file a number of cases within the next month and a half. Our institutions are becoming stronger. If the people voted for a nation that upholds the rule of law, that is exactly the country we are now building, and we will definitely deliver on that promise.
Fast track your career from O levels with eSoft.
ඩයිබටසෝල් සීනිවලින් පරිස්සම් වන ඔබට අමතක නොවන පෝෂණය.
කැලනි වයර් කිසිගින්නක් නෑ.
කිසිගින්නක් නෑ. කැලනි ෆයර් ෂීල්ඩ් වයර්.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa accuses the government of lacking a plan to combat Sri Lanka's criminal underworld. Addressing an SJB public meeting in Agalawatta, the opposition leader claimed that violence has replaced the sovereignty of the people as the law of the land. Another public meeting of the Samagi Jana Balawegaya in view of the impending local government elections was held in Agalawatta today under the patronage of party leader of the opposition Sajith Premadasa. At the event, UNP electorate organizer for Palinda Nuwara Induril Mahendra joined the SJB.
We are living in a country with no public security. Law and order has not been established in the country. A number of murders are reported every day. Organized criminal groups have taken over the country. There's no freedom for the people. They call the country independent and peaceful only in name. But everyone is living in terror. The law of the land is not the sovereignty of the people, but rifles, bombs and ammunition. The NPP government does not have the capability, plans or vision to establish law and order. Samagi Jana Balawegaya is the only alternative for the country. We will achieve an outstanding victory at the local government elections. We pledge to uphold the supremacy of the law.
Postal voting for the 2025 local government elections is set to commence tomorrow. Commissioner General of Elections Saman Sri Ratnayaka confirmed that no other dates will be granted for postal voting except the 24th, 25th, 28th and 29th of this month. He further revealed that a special postal voting centre has been established at Girls High School Kandy to enable police personnel deployed on duty at the exposition of the Sacred Tooth Relic to mark their postal votes. The Election Commission noted that a total of 648,495 voters are eligible to cast postal votes for the impending local government elections. Accordingly, postal voting will commence tomorrow and will also take place on the 25th, 28th and 29th of this month.
Postal voting for the local government elections will commence tomorrow. Accordingly, 4 days have been allocated for postal voters to cast their votes at their respective workplaces in front of a certified officer. No other dates in addition to these will be granted for postal voting. The exposition of the Sacred Tooth Relic is ongoing. There are a number of police officers from all 25 districts who are on duty in Kandy. Approximately 8 to 10,000 police officers have been deployed to ensure security at the exposition. Subsequently, a special postal voting centre has been established at Girls High School Kandy to allow these police officers to cast their votes. The Kurunegala district accounts for the majority of postal votes with 70,509. Coming in next are the Kandy and Anuradhapura districts.
Indian High Commissioner to Sri Lanka Santosh Jha met with former Presidents Mahinda Rajapaksa and Ranil Wickremesinghe yesterday. During the meeting with former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, views were exchanged on the versatile and dynamic India-Sri Lanka partnership in the context of global developments. The Indian envoy also briefed former President Mahinda Rajapaksa on recent advancements made in Indo-Sri Lanka ties. High Commissioner Santosh Jha also met with former President Ranil Wickremesinghe last afternoon. They exchanged views on the shared history between India and Sri Lanka, as well as on the limitless potential of a shared future. Political activist Dan Priyasad, who was the victim of a shooting in Kolonnava last night, succumbed to his injuries. Police suspect that a father-son duo who were involved in the murder of Tilina Prasad, a brother of the victim, have also orchestrated the murder of Dan Priyasad. Meanwhile, 3 persons were apprehended by the Vallampatty police in connection with the incident. At around 9:05 p.m. last night, a shooting was carried out at the Laksanda 7 housing complex in Kolonnava, claiming the life of social and political activist Dan Priyasad. According to police, Priyasad had been under the influence of alcohol at the time of the shooting. The CCTV footage shows 2 assailants arriving at the residence using the stairs. One of them wearing a mask while the other wearing a helmet and making a phone call walked towards the residence. Subsequently, the assailants opened fire at the victim at least 7 times, 4 on the chest and 3 on the abdomen. Shortly after, the 2 assailants were seen fleeing the scene while carrying a 9mm firearm. Following the shooting, Priyasad was rushed to the intensive care unit of the Colombo National Hospital. However, police revealed that the victim succumbed to his injuries. Meanwhile, today, the Vallampatty police presented facts concerning the murder of Dan Priyasad to the Colombo Magistrates Court. Police stated that investigations have revealed information suggesting a connection between a father and son duo in relation to the relevant murder. They further revealed that the same father-son duo has a pending court case in connection with the murder of Tilina Prasad, a brother of the deceased. It was also revealed that the deceased had recently engaged in a fight with the father-son duo over the murder of his brother. Investigations are ongoing to apprehend the 2 individuals who have fled their residences, and the court also imposed an overseas travel ban on the duo. In the meantime, 3 other individuals have been apprehended in connection with the murder and are currently being interrogated by the Vallampatty police. An on-site investigation meanwhile was conducted by the magistrate this afternoon. The post-mortem examination of the deceased was conducted at the Colombo Police mortuary today. Further investigations into the incident are underway under the supervision of the Deputy Inspector General of Police in charge of the Western Province, Gayanga Marapana. Inspector General of Police Priyantha Veerasurya appointed SSP Shani Abesekara to the new committee appointed to study the report of the Presidential Commission of Inquiry into the Easter attacks. The number of members appointed to the new committee has now increased to 5. The appointment of SSP Shani Abesekara was confirmed by police media spokesperson SSP Buddhika Manatunga. Under direct instructions from President Anura Disanayake, the final report along with all accompanying volumes of the Presidential Commission of Inquiry into the Easter Sunday attack was formally submitted to the Criminal Investigation Department on the 20th of April. Yesterday, a committee was appointed under the chairmanship of Senior Deputy Inspector General of Police Asanga Karavita to review the report. The other committee members include Deputy Inspector General of the Criminal Investigation Department, the Director of the Criminal Investigation Department and the Director of the Terrorism Investigation Division. And with that, here's a look at the latest political discourse on underworld activities, the Easter Sunday attacks and the upcoming local government elections.
Dan Priyasad was not part of any underworld gang. He was simply someone who held a different political opinion. There was no apparent reason for the underworld to target him. If the police failed to uncover the connection between the murderer and Dan Priyasad, the responsibility for the crime must fall on the government. When underworld activities occur, it is often said that public security has been compromised. Ironically, those making such statements are often the same individuals who created, nurtured nurtured and were protected by the underworld. We must put an end to the underworld and dismantle the social, economic and political environment that is created by the criminal underworld.
ආණ්ඩුවට වැඩ බැරි වෙනකොට මොකද කරන්නේ? චෝදනා කළා, තර්ජනය කළා, තමන්ගේ දේශපාලනය කරන්න උත්සාහ කරනවා.
Those who can actively contribute to the development of the country and local communities should become members of local government authorities. If someone outside the NPP is elected, the development we expect over the next 4 years cannot be realized. They claim to have stopped theft, but have they stopped lying? When the Cardinal demanded that all those responsible for the Easter Sunday attacks be revealed by April 21st, the President agreed. But has he followed through? We were all waiting for breaking news on who the mastermind behind the Easter Sunday attacks was. In the end, they even deceived the Catholic community. When they accused others of benefiting from the tragedy, it is the NPP that has ultimately gained the most from it.
Meanwhile, a committee of inquiry chaired by Supreme Court Justice Preeti Padman Surasena has been appointed to investigate allegations of misconduct and abuse of power against suspended Inspector General of Police Deshabandhu Tennakoon. The committee also comprises Justice Neil Iddawala and Lalit Ekanayaka, Chairman of the National Police Commission. A resolution to appoint a committee of inquiry for the potential removal of Deshabandhu Tennakoon from his position as IGP, citing alleged misconduct and abuse of power, was passed in Parliament on the 9th of April. A total of 151 National People's Power members of Parliament voted in favour of the resolution presented by NPP MP Lakmali Hemachandra, and none voted against it. In accordance with standing orders, the Chief Justice is required to appoint a judge to the committee, while a professional mutually agreed upon by the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition must also be named. As stipulated by the provisions, a Chairman of the National Police Commission is a mandatory member of the committee. Now, the Ceylon Electricity Board, releasing findings from an independent expert committee on the nationwide power outage that occurred on February 9th this year, said that the blackout was primarily due to system inertia caused by a high reliance on solar photovoltaic power. Issuing a statement, the CEB said that on the day of the blackout, solar photovoltaic power was supplying over half of the country's electricity. Accordingly, a disturbance at the Panadura grid substation triggered a voltage drop, and with minimal traditional power plants operating to stabilize the grid, a cascading failure led to a total blackout. This incident has occurred during a low-demand weekend commonly known as the Sunny Sunday effect, when many businesses and industries consume less electricity. Accordingly, the committee has recommended urgent steps to strengthen grid stability, including battery storage systems, synchronous condensers and improvised monitoring tools. The CEB also stated that the report confirms its initial explanation regarding the blackout and rejects false claims blaming the Victoria Power Station or misreporting of the incident. The full report is available on the PUCSL website. For more of the latest, join us after this short commercial break. Welcome back. You're once again joining First at 9 on Other Derana 24. Now, Sri Lanka's export earnings for March this year recorded at $1.5 billion. This reflects a 6.24% increase in export revenue compared to the same month in 2024. March export earnings also mark an 11.76% month-on-month increase from February this year. According to the Export Development Board, merchandise export performance in March 2025 amounted to over $1.2 billion, representing a 5.8% year-on-year increase. Services exports earned $291 million, showing an increase of 7.79% compared to March 2024. Among Sri Lanka's top 15 export markets, the United States, India, the United Kingdom and the European Union all demonstrated positive growth during the month of March. Meanwhile, during the first quarter of 2025, total exports reached $4.2 billion, reflecting a 5.9% growth compared to the same period of last year. Now in your stock update, the Colombo Stock Exchange closed in negative territory today as a result of price losses in food, beverage and tobacco and diversified financials counters. The benchmark all-share price index closed 0.08% lower at 15,544, while the more liquid S&P SL20 gained 0.05% to close at 4,592. Market turnover was 1.095 billion rupees, with the highest contributions from Lion Brewery, Melster Corp and Central Finance Company. The food, beverage and tobacco sector emerged as the top contributor to turnover, followed by the diversified financial sector. Foreign investors closed as net sellers, offloading shares worth 80 million rupees. And up next, we have Minal Vikramage from Capital Alliance in our next segment, Economic Outlook.
The weekly average weighted prime lending rate for the week ending 17 April declining by 19 basis points to 8.44%. For the average weighted call money rate, it's slightly lower to 7.96%. Reserve money remained broadly unchanged during the week, while the total outstanding market liquidity recorded a surplus of 57.33 billion rupees. Primary market yields for treasury bills remained broadly stable. However, in the secondary market, both treasury bill and treasury bond rates recorded a slight decline. The rupee value of treasury bills and bonds held by foreign investors dropped by 2%. The weekly treasury bill auction was met with strong demand, achieving an oversubscription rate of about 2.4 times. The overall activity in the secondary market was subdued, with total transaction volume falling by 42.7%.
Welcome back to First at 9. And now the police requests the general public to refrain from visiting the Temple of the Tooth Relic in Kandy during the next 2 days for the special exposition of the sacred tooth relic. Police said that those arriving during the upcoming 2 days will not be able to offer their devotions, as over 300,000 devotees are already waiting in queues.
The special exposition of the sacred tooth relic of Lord Buddha commenced today for the 6th consecutive day at the Temple of the Tooth Relic in Kandy, with large crowds continuously queuing up to offer devotions. As usual, the Siri Dalada Vandanava commenced at 11 a.m. today. Approximately 82,500 devotees were able to venerate the sacred tooth relic today, while those unable to pay homage are presently spending the night on the 3 access routes in hopes of witnessing the sacred tooth relic. Meanwhile, the Dansal organized to provide food for the devotees attending the exposition was successfully conducted today as well. Per the request of the District Secretary of Kandy and the Governor of the Central Province, army personnel were called on today to assist the police officers in managing the heavy congestion of devotees. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka police urged the public to avoid visiting the exposition tomorrow and the day after to witness the sacred tooth relic, as there are more than 300,000 devotees currently waiting in queues, and to choose an alternate date instead.
And that's all for tonight from First at 9. Thank you for joining. Have a great night.